You're on.
_24th, 2020, sunny outside and 5 p.m. and you are live with, wrong time. My bad. It's 1:30 and you are live with Maurice Robinson and Tesfana Gebremariam. Passing it over to Tesfana, my co-host, now with our word of the day.
Hello, this your girl Tesfana, the T of MTTalk's top of the hour of social justice warriors. And today's word of the day is leader. Speaking of leaders, we would like to introduce you to one of our own. Please give a round of applause for Miss Olivia Jones. Welcome. So Olivia, would you mind telling us a little bit about yourself?
Yes, my name's Olivia Jones. I'm a co-founder and administrator at Empower Community High School. Should I tell you more about myself? Or just
Yes,
that?
please.
Yes? Okay. Well, I'm very passionate about student-led learning. That's what led me to work with a group of students and families at Empower. We started meeting in October 2017 and really just gathering like a group of people who all were united by their by a collective desire to see a change in education. And I'd experienced that on a smaller level, working with a group of students to open a student-led writing center at Manual High School in Denver, and just experienced what that felt like when power is shared in the classroom and students really have the ability to be authors of their own learning and education. And once I'd experienced that, I had zero interest in going back to the normal version of education, which is what led me to start working with those students and families on the community design team at Empower. And we went about the whole school design process, like we tried to democratize what the school founder role looked like, so that instead of there just being one school founder, there was actually a whole group of people who all contributed to what the vision and mission and academic program and every element of the school would look like, so that power was really shared in that decision-making process. And then, sorry, let me catch my chain of thought here. Yeah, so that's been quite an adventure. We, Empower opened in fall 2019. And I guess because it's been kind of all consuming for the last couple years, that's probably the best pieces to know about me for now. I also am a sister and a daughter. I have and an aunt. I just had a new niece who was born last month. And then I have another niece and a nephew as well.
With that, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, with that, talking about how you show up as a leader every day in your community, is there someone or something that motivates you to do that?
Yes. There are a lot of people who motivate me, but there's one that stays at the front of my heart and mind always, and that's really actually all students who I've had, but especially one student whose name was Mardale J. He passed away right after graduating after graduating from high school in his senior year. And he had a full ride scholarship to attend actually any college of his choice that he'd gotten when he was in 8th grade. And he just worked extremely hard all throughout high school. And I saw the ways in which actually poverty will rob you of your life, even if you do everything right. So he died from a illness that he'd gotten from living in poverty. And then that wasn't helped by the fact that he didn't have access to good health care. And so, you know, that tragedy, losing someone who I had the opportunity to be his teacher from his freshman year all the way to his senior year. So we had a very close relationship, and I just watched all, I think one of the most magical parts of being a teacher is that you get to watch people, like you witness them grow into their like full selves and experience what it's like to be their full authentic self. And I think that can be, well, that is one of the most beautiful parts of being a teacher and working in education, if not the most beautiful. And it can also make it really hard when you lose a student because you've envisioned this person's future sometimes more than you've even envisioned your own. You've thought so critically about like what it would take to get this person to be ready for, like, for example, I think I probably think more often about what you two will be able to think and do in May 2023 than you do, because I'm always trying to think about what do you need to have access to in the next 4 years to be ready for that date so that you could open any door you want to open. And so that really, his passing has stuck with me, and is, you know, I really admired how he chose to lead when he was in my class, and really beyond that. He was one of the students who started the Writing Center with me, and so that's someone who I always have in my mind.
Thank you so much for sharing that with us. For the whole group, can you guys give me an example of a leader in your life that you know or don't know that are alive?
That are what, alike?
No, they could be alive right now or they can't.
Okay. So someone who I just think embodies leadership. Okay.
Does it have to be a good leader in terms of from an ethical perspective, or a bad leader? Because I think you could be effective as a leader. Tesfana. So my question to you is this: are you looking for effective leadership or someone who is a good leader?
Both. A good leader that's
Who is effective.
Yeah.
It depends.
Okay.
You want one person. Go for it, Olivia.
One, yeah, right? Oh, wait, do you have yours? Are you answering too?
I am, but I'm going to pass this question to you.
Okay, let's see. Okay, one who I know and just have always admired is Candy Sidabaka. I'm not sure if either of you have heard her name before. She is a city councilwoman in Denver, but I knew her back before she was doing that, when she was working as, she was a founder and started an organization and then continued to work with them called Project Voice, which just, it was very similar to what we're doing at Empower, but instead of it being at a school level, it was just at a program level. And I admire her, and the reason why I name her is because she really, I think the strongest and most effective leaders are ones who are very connected to the people they lead, and also who are like have deep roots and a sense of belonging in the place where they lead. I think it can be tempting, especially in the world we're in now where things are virtual, to think as long as you have strong leadership skills, we could just drop you anywhere and you can go and lead. I don't personally believe in that philosophy. I think it's more about, because in order to be a strong leader, you have to have such a deep and real understanding of what the life experience of, and like your understanding of those people and the place where you lead needs to be so deep, and those things can be so nuanced and so hard to really understand. So I think it takes actually like living and growing up in a place and investing your time and your energy and your leadership skills in that community, both the physical location and the people who belong there. And Candy, like that program she started, Project Voice, the first place she started doing it was at the high school where she graduated, which was Manual High School, where I worked as well. And then now she's serving as a councilwoman in the district where she is from, where she grew up in Denver, and is fighting, you know, things like gentrification, which she experienced as a person who grew up in that neighborhood, and now can like very, like her ability to represent people, I think is just, yeah, so I guess, sorry, that was long-winded, but that's my example.
Well, I have a question for you, Olivia.
Yep.
If you're looking at a grassroots level, that's what you're discussing. People who are from the place and they lead in the location way they grew up in terms of the issues that they've dealt with.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think about leaders who are on the political level on a grand scale, whether it be on a state level, federal level? Because those are the people that we sort of think about when we talk about leaders. You know, Greta Thunberg, all these people even on an international level who are so prominent on basically every magazine.
Yeah.
What do you think about, because they're invested in not so much locality, but in issues that stem from on an international level?
Yeah, I think, I think I'd be interested how those people interact on a local level also. So I think there's the possibility to have a global influence, but leadership, there's still like that local element that I just think is really important. Because even at a state level, like I wouldn't want, and it doesn't necessarily need to be like where you were born, but I think where you've spent the majority of your time, like I don't know how good I would feel about a state representative who just moved to Colorado than being in charge and being the governor of Colorado. Like I don't know, because I wouldn't trust that their understanding of what Coloradans need in terms of leadership would be very accurate. And I think really all kinds of social change, and anytime you're doing like it moves at the speed of trust. And so if you don't have the trust of the people who are following you, then no change that you try to influence will it won't be effective. People don't tend to listen unless it's someone who they trust. But again, that you're right, it reveals my bias, which is I believe more in like grassroots power than positional power. So I think you can be an effective positional leader, but it's just about like when is the right time and place for that, given what your goals are. So does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Would it be accurate to say, and you guys could sort of chime in, Tesfana, Maurice, that ultimately your value is in people, not the issue. So the issue is not affecting people, because ultimately you're saying it's who I'm affected by in the place that they're in, rather than issue independent of the people.
Yes, I guess I think that that's fair. And I think it could, you could think that then that means like I'm not invested in environmental issues, but more, I think, so Greta is a good example. She has, I feel like if you looked at where she has followers, it would probably be with youth. And that's because you can see yourselves reflected in her leadership, and you can find you are inspired by the fact that even though she's, how old is she right now?
Oh no. Do you guys, isn't she like
right?
14, 15 now?
Yeah, something really young, right? Mm-hmm. So then I think though she's very connected to youth who are organizing for environmental issues on the ground, and just even ones like across social media. I think, so it still has something to do with your orientation to the people and the cause that you lead. And I think she's also done a very good job, because she's a young person. She's figured out how to frame the issue and how to take action for young people. Like I've seen a lot more young people in the last couple of years since she's become vocal, having a desire to fight for environmental justice, and also just an awareness of environmental issues and a commitment to work to address specifically environmental injustice. And I think a lot of that is because she is also young and knows how to talk to young people and how to frame the issue in a way that's relevant and meaningful to them. So I guess that's what I meant by the local piece of just, you need to understand who you're asking to help you. You need to understand them so deeply and relate to them on a level where they can trust you. And because I'm guessing you both trust her that she's not telling you something inaccurate about the environment, or that she's not trying to like manipulate you or get you to do something that you don't want to do. I think a big piece of that is having that connection to the people themselves. And yes, you're right. How many times I just said people, I clearly care about that the most.
I agree, because you can't lead a community to a solution if you don't know what the issue is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right. And I think even the solution you design is probably going to be less effective than if, you know, Greta's solution, I think, is more effective because she's also a young person. So she knows how to propose it in a way that young people are like, yeah, that's an actual solution I can, like, I can sign my name to, I can endorse that. I want to follow this person, versus like, I'm thinking, have either of you heard of Greenpeace before?
I've heard of it, yeah.
Heard of it, but have you ever engaged with anything that they've been targeting youth to get involved with environmental action for a very long time. I think, you know, they're still successful. They have a lot of youth who participate, but I don't think it's as effective as Greta, who is also a young person that's coming to say, hey, let's fight that there's still a world left for us when we are old and for our children. And I just think that's always going to be more effective than an adult who, you know, not in this specific example, but to reach that target audience. Yeah.
I definitely do. I think it's more like when we say, you know, locally, it's more locally to self. Like, where can I see myself inside of you, and less of locally, like just because you live here. Because there's people that live here in Colorado or that are from the Aurora area, and one, you could just be totally oblivious to what you feel is going on, or you don't want to really give acknowledgement to it. And it's more so like a younger person standing up, I'm going to see more of myself in it. Like, oh, that person's young, that person's only a couple years away from me or the same age as me, so I can see myself more in it, and it's more engaged. And I definitely think it is more about that talk. Like, there's a certain conversation that you can have where it's youth talking to each other, and there's a certain conversation you can have where it's youth talking to an adult. You can tell, like, the tone of voice changes, you try to drop it. It's just more about where you feel comfortable. I would feel more comfortable taking after a young leader than I would more so an older one, because it's just more things I feel like I have to change about myself to assimilate with the conversation.
Yeah,
makes sense.
to add on to that, I'm like more open to people that I know I could trust and relate to. So that I agree. So what would you guys think are like bad characteristics of a leader? Like characteristics of a bad leader?
To be honest, it's not the intention, because I think a lot of people are well-intended.
That's true.
I know parents who are well-intended do a lot of damaging things to their children. I think it's all about method and consequences, because I don't know too many people who go around the world and say, I have a bad intent.
Right.
It's the way they go about resolving the issues and the consequences. So people say, oh, you're well-intended, I guess, so it doesn't really matter. No, it does matter, because I've seen so much damage from people who are well-intended than people who are, because I know people who have selfish intent and have good consequences. So for me, ultimately, it's about the method that you use, how effective you are in terms of its consequences. So bad characteristics of a leader is who doesn't know how to use the methods, how to create solutions that will impact the people the most for their benefit. So that's what I think is a bad leader, who's not wise with what the resources that they have available to them.
I have a question towards that. I think also sometimes, sorry if I have a lot of feedback in the background, but I also think sometimes that, like, we're so quick to say someone's a bad leader or a bad characteristic. I think it's also because, I don't know, I think like morality is a complicated situation to say whether someone is good or someone is bad. But I also think it's something that we've all been so adapted to doing that we just take the connotations with whatever their platform is or how we perceive what they're doing, like selfish intent. We've associated the word selfish with bad connotations. So I just think it also depends on that. I don't necessarily want to say anyone is a bad leader or a good leader. I just think it's more on one of those things that's like human about us. Like, you see one thing and we're so quick to give it a label to what we think it is or what we perceive it to be. So I don't know. That's why when you first mentioned, Dr. Drew, when you had first mentioned it, and when we asked the question about a leader that you know that might have been passed or still living today, and you asked, do they have to like have? You said something, but it was bad leader, or I think it was bad intent, or things like that.
I believe it was bad or if ineffective.
Yeah, that one. And that's why I kind of like thought about it, because I think it's like you said, no one really walks around and says, I have bad intent. I'm going to make sure that this is not effective whatsoever. So I think it's more so just like we as humans and we as people just think that it's okay to tell people what's good, what's bad, what's right, what's wrong. So I think it's more so like, I don't know. I mean, I have my own personal perceptions too, don't get me wrong. I'd like to think that some people are bad or their actions are wrong. But I just think taking a little step further back from it and thinking about it in a more whole view and kind of taking my own judgment out of it, I think that's just where it really comes from too. It's just how we want to put labels to people. That's how I feel about it.
Well, one of the things you need to think about is presidents are not judged by the present generation usually, but actually the future. And of course, there's revisionist history in the sense that in one generation, we might think Bush was a bad president, let's say, for example. The next generation, compared to Trump, they'll say he was a good president.
Right.
In other words, you are right. It's very relative as to who a good or bad leader is. Only history assesses a person on sort of reflecting back in terms of what they were able or not able to do. So it's hard. Even now, I think about who would I consider to be a good leader? Who would I consider to be a bad leader? And it's so difficult because like you said, there's certain things that they do effectively for the benefit of the community. And there's some who do not do things well, even with all the resources, even with all the good intentions, they harm the community more than one would think. And so it's this notion of good and bad it's very difficult to break apart. Olivia, what do you think?
So I'm thinking two things. I think first, what Dr. Drew said first made me think about this. There's a speech that I'll send you both, and the title of the speech also is language okay on here. Try to bleep.
Yeah.
Okay. The title of the speech is called "The Road to Hell is Paved with Good Intentions." And it's all about, like, yes, people's intentions can be very good. That doesn't mean that the impact won't be negative. Because sometimes what's wrapped up in people's intentions is a whole bunch of other things. And then there's also the implementation of, or like how they choose to execute those intentions, which is what Dr. Drew was saying. Like that can also lead, you can have good or bad intentions. Your execution is kind of a whole other thing. And those practices will also impact whether or not you can reach the outcome you're trying to reach as the leader. I think though, for me, one of the central qualities to a strong leader is one, having the humility to admit when you're wrong and when you don't know how to do something or you don't know the answer. Like I think there's a lot of, one ineffective way of executing leadership is to pretend like that means you know everything and you never need help and you never are wrong, which those things are just never true. And for me, it's like very important. And I trust a leader a lot more when I hear them say, yep, that was my mistake. I'm sorry. Here's what I'm going to do differently next time. Or yeah, I don't know. I'm not the expert on this. So I'm calling in this person to support me, or I'm bringing in these people who can help fill these gaps that I have in my skills or my knowledge. So I think that's a big like quality in an effective leader. I also think it's this double-edged sword of you need someone who has humility and you need someone who has confidence and is sure of what they're doing. Like you also can't have someone who's second guessing everything that they're doing. Some of that, I think that's like work you have to go through on your own, or to constantly be growing, so that also even when you're acknowledging and owning a mistake, it's not because you didn't care or because you had bad intentions. It's, yeah, I did that because I thought it was the best choice at this time. Here's why I thought it was best. It wasn't, but having that level of like also integrity, knowing that the decisions that you're making them for very, like you're clear on your reasons for why you're making any given decision, especially when it's a decision that impacts a lot of other people besides you. I think you need to, yeah, so I guess humility balanced with confidence and to act with integrity so that you have that confidence, like knowing, yep, this is my internal compass or this is my North Star. I always use this to make these decisions. This is what I'm weighing in terms of pros and cons, so that you aren't just like randomly making decisions that seem easiest in the moment and you're actually running through like, and sometimes that means you don't know how to do that. And so you ask for support and someone helps you with that level of like strategic thinking. But yeah, so those would be my, I guess that didn't really answer, but kind of. Go ahead, Tesfana.
For me, like a leader could have very good intentions and like a really good plan to follow through with the intention. But I like to kind of focus on what community that will help, because the good intention, if it doesn't help the ones in need, but just adds on to people that have everything they need, then like I don't really understand the point. Like equity is very important.
Can you explain what you mean by that a little bit? Like the equity piece at the end?
Yeah, so like giving people giving people that are in need more resources instead of just adding on resources for people that already have many that they can depend on.
Yep. And so do you think that happens most often because people have bad intentions, or just because they might have good intentions, but they just don't know what they're doing? So
Yeah, they could have good intentions, but sometimes it's for the wrong group, for the group that doesn't need it.
Okay, yep. That makes sense.
We have a couple more minutes. So what I would like to ask all of you guys is, there are two questions and I would like to have a quick response. The first question is this: are all people born to be leaders? Or, okay, that's one. The second question is this: how is a social justice leader different from leaders that we see in the corporate world, in the political world, or just basically for-profit sector, as I would say? So quick response, because I think these are two questions that need to be dealt with, especially in this training program. Because I think a lot of the students were wanting to know, do I have what it takes to be a leader? Or am I just a follower first? And second is social justice. Why do we need a separate training program for social justice as opposed to just any leadership training program?
I have a
Final
question.
thoughts, Maurice? You can't ask a question about it.
But
You have to give me the answer, man.
I don't know.
Yes, Maurice, what's your question?
Oh, I was just gonna say, can a follower be a leader? That was all I was gonna say.
You could be both given different situations. My question is everyone have all the skills within them to become a leader? We're just molding them into a leader? Or is it some people are just equipped better? Ms. Jones, you've had these questions for 3 months now.
Yeah, you want me to answer first?
Yes, please.
Okay. Well, I think, Maurice, your question is very insightful, because that's the first step, is figuring out, I feel like in order to answer this question, I need a qualifier around what kind of leadership are we talking about? Like, can everyone lead? Yes, I believe everyone can lead. And that's in the general sense of like, I believe there's all kinds of things that we all do every day that are forms of leadership. Like just being disciplined means you're modeling what it looks like to be a disciplined person. And that in and of like that helps other people understand, which is a form of leadership. I think if you said, does everyone have the ability to be molded into a leader who can be put into a position of power and lead a lot of people? That's a trickier question, because I think there are, I think there's dispositions that are more aligned with that kind of leadership role. And also, for example, I am an introvert, which means I do not get energy from being in a big group of people. And even like a class size of 30 I feel drained at the end of it, versus someone who's an extrovert who that's where they get their energy. They show up in front of that group of people and they like feel the energy filling them up and want to spend more time in that kind of setting. So I think there's pieces like that that really impact it. And that doesn't necessarily mean someone could or couldn't. I think the most central piece is how motivated are you internally to lead in this way? Because for me, leadership is really hard. It requires a lot of sacrifice, like that, the bigger sense of it, because it means you have to put other people's needs before your own. So remember at the end of opening ceremony, we joked with you, Maurice, you were like, I didn't get any food. This sucks. And you and I laughed. We're like, that is leadership. We never ate at one CDT meeting for the last 2 years. So I think it's like you, and then, I mean, that's a silly example, but I think about it all the time. Like sometimes I'll talk to friends who have spent the last, like the last 5 years of their professional lives, but just like traveling and working remotely and seeing the whole world. And I have only been out of the country one time in my whole life on a college trip. And obviously I didn't prioritize like traveling and exploring the world in the last 5 years. I just hunkered down and like did the work that I had to do personally and professionally to make things happen at Empower. So I think that's it. What it really boils down to is how much in the individual intrinsically do they feel motivated and like a calling to step into this leadership role? Because without that, I don't know how you sustain the level of sacrifice that is required. And I think the difference between the second part of your question, Dr. Ju, about social justice versus corporate world, I think it's all about like the what that you're trying to accomplish. So if we put it in the corporate context, people, what they're trying to do is increase profits. And ultimately that's the end goal, which means if that's the main priority, all other decisions are around that. So even if it's employee satisfaction is also important, it's important because employees who are satisfied work better, which is going to increase your profit margin. So again, it's all leading to just more money versus someone who's a social justice leader. It's a lot more complicated because people work, I think, is always going to be more complicated than a profit. It's not as easy as like this, we'll make this much money when we sell this many products. Or if I manage these employees and I pay them this much, like people are more complicated than math that way. And I think it requires a more nuanced understanding of the people you're leading, the issue you're focused on, and even like you just need a lot more people to help you. Because I think the leadership role is just more complicated and it's harder work.
There are less rewards.
Exactly.
Social justice work, the rewards are not explicit, it's not direct. You don't see it. You might never, you've at least visualized Empower and you're experiencing it. But the day-to-day grunt, nothing about it is sexy. You don't get a Maserati at the end of the day because you've made a few $1 million for a client. You're not going to get that. You might get someone say, hey, good job on the pat on the shoulder, but that's the extent. It might be from someone you don't even like, but nevertheless, that's the extent. And so one of the things we're going to be exploring, and I think that's very important, is this. When you are in social justice work, your definition of success, your definition of hope, your definition for a lot of things are going to be different than you once you enter the corporate world. And that is the redefinition is extremely important. Otherwise, I think most people become disillusioned and burn out because it's not sexy. It's not fun. It's a lot of grunge work. It's a lot of sacrifice, as Olivia was saying. So this is the reason why, if you're in it for the long haul, this program is extremely important because you have to understand what's behind it. Okay.
Yeah, I think that's an important note to make, because it really what it is once you step in, you're taking on that responsibility of, like, you know, like a tangible example. Yesterday, no, once you guys took that elective survey last week, you know, someone has to go through the puzzle of like building out individual student schedules. No part of me is passionate about that task. I don't want to do it. I don't want to spend all my Saturday and Sunday working on it into the middle hours of the night. But ultimately, it's my responsibility to make sure that that happens. Well, mine and Wisdom's, and we can't just decide we don't want to do it on Saturday, because we have almost 200 people who on Monday are waiting for us to send, in fact, actually sooner than Monday. Like, we got emails and texts starting a Sunday, be like, hey, where's the schedule? Where's the schedule? And if we were to just say like, I just can't, I just don't want to do that today. You know, there's all these people who are counting on you that then you let them down, and that will break the trust. And then you won't be able to do any of the work that you set out to do in the first place. So it's like, I think that's why I say it's really important for people to be motivated about what they're leading, the issue they're leading around, because otherwise, when it gets to the work that Dr. Drew talked about, the work that you don't really want to do, and that it's not exciting and you're not going to get a Maserati, like, I don't know what would motivate you to keep doing it, except for that you care very deeply about the mission and vision of what you're trying to do and the people who you like. What motivates me is I know both of you need a class schedule and you're counting on me, and I have your trust and I don't want to break your trust. So whether or not I want to sit and do it, I'm going to do it anyway. And I think that's really an important quality to keep in mind, especially when it's the social justice work, because I don't know how you sustain it otherwise.
Tess, Maurice, do you have final words?
I would like to say that, like, yeah, people, I believe that there's a leader in everybody. It might be like in different things, but in society, sometimes followers are considered as a negative thing. What would you guys think on that?
I think I love followers.
Yep.
I love followers because too many people think they're leaders. And to be honest, I would rather be a follower than a leader. But unfortunately, no one is doing what I want to do, so I can't follow them. Does this answer your question, Tess?
Yeah, and to add on to that, I also believe that followers are very important to make a plan work out, because like some people succeed independently, but like, for example, if somebody started a business and then the followers could be like the customers that want to help them, but if there are no customers, the business would just fail. So then, like, a lot of times leaders can't succeed without their followers.
Yes.
Yeah, I think it's just a weird, like, it's our instinct to put things on a hierarchy always and to make one better than another. And then I think it's like, you call that reactionary to then do what you're saying, Dr. Drew, of like, okay, well then all followers are also leaders. I think that's where it goes back to what I was saying a minute ago about, you know, you can model, and that's a form of leadership just by doing, like, following your own instincts and having integrity, but it's not quite the same. And I'm not sure why people want to conflate them, because it's also such a powerful experience to be a follower. I think we don't have enough leaders in the world who have, well, that's not true. The right leaders don't get the right amount of press, so we don't often see and like get the chance to follow leaders who we truly believe in, right? Like I would guess that no one on this call is particularly excited to be a follower of Donald Trump, right? But given the hierarchy, like that's the position that we're in. I think though, if we had leaders who we felt very passionate about and who we could identify with and who we felt reflected our values, we might not have that instinct to think of like following is somehow lower on the totem, or lower ranking on this hierarchy of what's important than leadership. Because I think leaders that, even when they're leaders, are followers in some capacity also. Like we all are, even if it's just we've chosen who we look up to. Like I'm not sure if Candy knows that would have been my answer today, but the fact that that's my answer means I am a follower of hers, regardless of if I'm in a leadership position, because my leadership style has been informed by following her in the past. And I think that's an important piece to name, which is that there is no leader who's ever not been a follower, and everyone is always like, right? Everything is a remix, which means I'm looking always at all the people around me and borrowing what I see that like, oh, that's a good strategy. I'm going to try that as a leader. And so I think it's important to also recognize that piece and know there isn't like, we're just ascribing value to those because of our own like wanting to rank everything, not because, at least in my personal opinion, not because there should be a ranking.
Because of the time issue, Maurice, make the final statement and then we're going to close.
I think I agree. I think that's why I asked like if a leader could be a follower, or if a follower can be a leader, because I think for that like clarifying point of like, we do that a lot. Like it's followers and then it's leaders, and then followers is negatively thing. Like people say, are you a leader or a follower, as if it's to juxtapose the two, as if one is bad or one is good. I know personally my parents or somebody like in my family has asked me that before, and it's kind of made me think about it. Yeah, I think the difference between those social justice work and like large corporation or political work is the difference is like, for instance, political work, I'm thinking of, okay, as a president, or even if you're working in political work, you're doing that for the bettering of a bigger crowd. So like you have the expectation like Congress, the people that are up there doing things, making laws, those type of things, they have the expectation of it's going to affect everybody in some sort of way. And then eventually it'll trickle down to affect individual groups or individual people. So it kind of works with that. For me, I think social justice is it's more personalized, and you see yourself in it. So it makes it more of that difference when you can actually buckle down on the issue and say, no, look, this is the issue. This is who is being affected by it now. These are the real victims of the story. And then this is what really needs to start happening. And you're kind of making change for that individual group, as opposed to trying to change everybody writ large and just hoping that something just trickles into different groups. That's what I think.
Okay, I'm going to have to close. This is the beginning of a lot of great conversation we'll be having in this program. You're going to have a lot of interesting guest speakers, most of whom I've actually have personal relationships with. So it's wonderful to have you, Ms. Jones, on this program.
Thank you. I had a lot of fun. How do I listen to the podcast?
You have to pay us extra money.
Well, that's fair, but I want to subscribe. Like, I definitely want to hear the people who come after too. I don't know that I need to hear my own voice, but I would love to hear the other guest speakers that you guys have.
I'll talk to you about it afterwards. Maurice, Tesfana, thank you. And if there are no final comments, we're going to end this program. Anyone final words?
Thank you for coming.
Thank you guys for inviting me. This was the best part of my day.
Tesfana, you want to say anything?
Thank you for your time and participation.
All right, excellent. All right, guys, I'm going to stop the recording now.